60, 70, 80, 90.
It was possibly the end of an era today. After 60 years, wool sales may be over in Newcastle.
I think it's pretty paltry to suggest that a governing body in Sydney should even consider closing Newcastle.
Although a final decision hasn't been announced, the Australian Wool Exchange is planning to centralise its operations in Sydney.
The board policy, the AWEX board policy, is for centralisation, and the decision has been made to close the centre.
Despite the odds, growers used this sale to muster support. While plans are in the pipeline to establish a breakaway selling centre in Newcastle, growers are prepared to go one step further, calling for the resignation of Wool Exchange Chairman Peter Smith.
If the growers and buyers combine there, you're looking at 66% of the people who pay this fellow's wages. So, surely we've got some sort of clout.
The Wool Exchange has agreed to review its decision at a meeting at Dubbo in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, New England grower Peter Munsey continued his 10-year tradition, notching up the top price for the week, his superfine wool fetching 8,300 cents a kilo. Vanessa Spark, NBN News. Emergency workers battled wet conditions during the early hours of this morning in a bid to reach the young woman. It's believed the car veered off Northcott Drive at Adamstown Heights before taking out a brick fence and ramming into a house. Shocked neighbours looked on as fragments of the vehicle were painstakingly removed from the wreckage. Helpless for nearly an hour, the woman was finally released from the vehicle and taken to the John Hunter Hospital with minor injuries. Meanwhile, a 25-year-old Cooranbong man and his 2-year-old son remain in a stable condition after they were injured in a 5-car collision at Toronto. Emergency services were called to the Awabba Road crash just after 8 last night. Ambulance workers treated the man and his son, along with a 25-year-old man from Freeman's Waterhole, before taking them to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital. It's believed 3 of the vehicles collided and minutes later 2 others smashed into the wreckage. Police are still probing the cause of both accidents. Vanessa Spark, NBN News.
Today's industrial action at Sydney's Town Hall saw thousands of angry workers demanding better job security at Energy Australia. With the possibility of another 1,000 jobs to go in Sydney and the Hunter, workers were fighting for improvements in salary maintenance. In earlier discussions with the New South Wales Labor Council and various trade unions, Energy Australia says it will maintain salaries beyond 12 months for redundant workers if they comply with performance criteria. That was accepted in principle at the MAS meeting. Workers also accepted a commitment by the power company to equalise salaries throughout the Sydney and Hunter areas. Both the council and union slammed Energy Australia for the way it had handled redundancies, saying the company was axing jobs on a purely budget-driven basis. Unions called it risk management, predicting that the job losses will make Energy Australia less efficient. Simone Cobb, NBN News. The wildly popular Annie Leibovitz exhibition generated a $100,000 profit for the Newcastle Regional Art Gallery. The main sponsors, Port Waratah Coal Services, says it expected those funds to go into a specially designated account to attract more world-class exhibitions to the city.
We're concerned that what has happened is that agreement may have been overturned by the council, and perhaps there's a misunderstanding about the relationship we have with the gallery.
Newcastle City Council agreed to only commit $65,000 to the special fund, saying it had a policy that did not allow any council bodies to retain that kind of money.
Personally, I think that the amount of money that I suggested, $65,000, which was really matching Port Waratah's.
PWCS is about to renegotiate its sponsorship contract with Council and says it wants to clear up the problem before committing funds for another 3 years. Keith Parsons says Council was unaware of the sponsorship agreement and plans to meet with PWCS before any final decisions are made.
Yes, if Port Waratah Coal Services are still unhappy, we could take the matter back to Council and redebate the issue, and it's quite possible that the figure could change.
Meanwhile, a new exhibition called Plastic Newcastle has opened at the gallery, showcasing the talents of 7 emerging local artists. Simone Cobb, NBN News.
Roy Delator preys on young girls. Last year, he indecently assaulted 5 little girls at Bathurst while on parole for sexually assaulting a 9-year-old at Orange. In spite of this breach of his parole, a magistrate granted him bail and he attacked again. His mother is extremely critical of that magistrate.
After 5 years of jail and 7 charges in Bathurst, and this man, whoever he was, said, "Out you go, Roy." It was almost like he gave Roy permission to do what he did.
What he did was to abduct and rape a 9-year-old girl while she played in a Newcastle park. Today, in Newcastle District Court, he was sentenced to a minimum of 11 years jail. Justice Rummery finding the Jesmond attack was violent and Delator an offender with little prospect of rehabilitation. Roy Delator will be eligible for parole in the year 2008. It will be up to the authorities of the time to determine whether he's released from prison or whether he serves an additional 3 years and 7 months. Given his track record on parole, even his own family believes he will reoffend.
Well, he's already told me to my face that yes, he will.
The father of Roy Delator's last victim was in court to see him sentenced. His daughter will be in her 20s when her attacker's released. He too hopes the system which failed her doesn't fail again. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The final touches have been added to Breakers Stadium. The pitch was given last-minute attention with the roller, while the grandstand also got a facelift. And despite spraying of another kind on fences at the ground, Hunter is ready for its Super League debut.
There's been a hell of a lot of hype this week on the game, and I think it's all building and can't wait for Sunday.
After that game last Friday against Canberra at Queanbeyan and a week of intensive training, Murray gave his troops a break from the hectic schedule today. Some ball work tomorrow morning will cap off the preparation. Then Sunday at 2:30, the vision will come to light.
There's a few nerves, and I've got to be honest about that, but sometimes that's a good thing. But they've trained well, and they haven't shown it necessarily, but I know a couple of them privately are a bit toey about the game.
Organisers hope the ground record of 8,987 will be smashed for the locals' clash with Canterbury. Bookmakers rate the home side a 9-4 chance of an upset victory. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
So is it 24 competitors? 24. And that's 24 competitors? Yes.
The Manly ferry took a different tack today, venturing north from Sydney Harbour to spend the day in Newcastle waters. 400 Sydney-siders made the 5-hour trip, spending the day with family and friends. 2 hours later, it was time to return, this time by land. The hot weather didn't melt the crew's enthusiasm. All stoked to be involved with railway history.
Oh, it takes us all back. You know, you can go down an electric and it's nice and smooth and air-conditioned, but it's got no character about it.
Some chose to make an extra special day of it, while others put their feet up and enjoyed the ride. Organised by Sydney's Rail Transport Museum, the fun day gives adventurers a novel day trip away for just $60.
Organisers had been hoping to smash the ground record at Breakers Stadium, but the crowd fell almost 2,500 short of expectations. Not a problem, says Graham Murray.
The people there were very supportive, so if you get 6,000 all going for you, or basically going for you, I thought it was a good effort.
The Mariners also put on a good effort. Up for most of the second half, Rod Silver spoiled what would have been a fairy tale debut in the dying minutes. Canterbury salvaged the match. Hunter, respect.
I think they were probably a bit surprised with our defence, and I think we'll surprise a few more before we finish.
The aches and pains of the first league game of the season were washed away at Lambton today. X-rays later in the day cleared Justin Dooley of a serious toe injury. The rest of the team is also fit and ready for the Mariners' trip across the Tasman for Saturday's battle with the Warriors. Jonathan Upton, NBN News. Conditions were ideal for day 2 of competition. 1 to 1.5 metre very contestable waves gave surfers plenty of opportunities for manoeuvres. But outmanoeuvred in his heat was Newcastle's Luke Egan. The Aussie number 1 was pipped by a 17-year-old rookie from the South Coast. He may have got to the classic the hard way through a wildcard entry, but teenager Philip McDonald surfed like the top seeds. His score of 26.7, too much for Egan's 26.
I thought I'd hang in here, you don't know. Could get some waves, and yeah, it happens, I just got through.
The comeback king Mark Occhilupo was also at his best. The form of old was back as Occhi knocked out Michael Romelsi 25.5 to 24.9. Great surfing also in the women's. 3 times world champion Florida's Lisa Anderson was one to advance to round 2, so too defending champion Kylie Webb.
Everyone's here, that's the only reason we're doing it for, is to become the best, so hopefully I can do it all the way to the rest of the year.
Surfing continues tomorrow with the second round of the women's and the third of the men's. Jonathan Upton, NBN News. The Mariners admitted today the team pulled up sore after its Super League debut. A full-on weight session helped to ease the pain as Graham Murray planned his side for this week's trip across the Tasman. Announcing the starting lineup at this afternoon's news conference, Murray has made one change to the team that played Canterbury. Into the 13 from injury comes Troy Stone. Onto the bench is Justin Dooley. A Dooley drop ball in the final minutes of the weekend debut handed the Bulldogs possession and eventually the game, but Graham Murray says that's not the sole reason for the change.
I've told him, and he knows that I'm not happy with it, but I won't use that as the excuse. I'll say more that Troy Stone deserves a spot.
The side leaves for the battle with the Warriors on Thursday. Meantime, Mariners Chief Executive Officer Bob Ferris will join his Super League counterparts tomorrow to discuss the controversial issue of footballs and ball control.
There's another thought that the ball is wrong. There's another thought that the jumper might even be wrong.
All options will be discussed. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
Paul Green died from a bullet to the heart after he pointed a shotgun at DEA officers in this house in Hubbard Street, Islington last year. He was also shot in the buttock and twice in the back of the arm, which according to a ballistics expert indicates he may have been shot as he turned or raised his arm to defend himself. Detective Senior Constables Darren Bennett and Graham Hepworth discharged their revolvers 11 times. Jeanette Chester and Dorothy Matthews heard the shooting from across the road. Their evidence was conflicting, however, Mrs. Chester saying she heard not one but 2 series of shots. Also giving evidence today, Detective Senior Sergeant Philip Walker, the field commander of the DEA operation. I can see nowhere at a supervisory or management level where this operation failed or where any mistakes were made. He said the operation was seen as low risk. Twice before, an undercover agent had successfully bought cannabis from Paul and Nicole Fay at the Islington house, and this was to be be no different, except police would make an arrest.
What police didn't realise that day, however, was that an armed Paul Green was in the house. Although he'd always been a target of the DEA operation, he'd never been seen. It was only while he was being treated by paramedics that officers realised who he was.
The inquiry in front of State Coroner Derek Hand continues tomorrow. Jodie McKay, NBN News. It was this ferocious bark that appears to have put the fear of God into two intruders at the Rathmines Bowling Club last night. Having broken into the kitchen at around 3 a.m, the bandits were cut off from the rest of the club by this German Shepherd called Max at the door. Too scared to risk it, they decided to gas the dog instead and turned on the stove jets. But fortunately for Max, a security guard wasn't far away.
Noticed the kitchen door was been forced open. And entering the club, he noticed a strong smell of gas inside the club. Quick internal and opened a few windows up and grabbed the dog and took him outside.
It was the fourth attempt to break into the club since Christmas. Although Max was unharmed, the potential for disaster was huge.
Well, we could have lost a good dog. The club could have blown up. Persons could have been killed, cleaners coming on site, the guard could have been killed.
Precautions will be taken to safeguard Max from any future attack. Simone Cobb, NBN News.
This Easter, Newcastle will resound to the sound of brass. 88 bands from around Australia, including one from New Zealand, will spend the 4 days of Easter blowing up a storm. Organisers promise something for everyone, music from the masters such as Beethoven to new works.
There'll be a lot of traditional brass band works and a lot of exciting concert band works, and in amongst all that you'll hear some entertaining music.
The majority of bands to compete at the championships will come from New South Wales, including 19 from the Hunter region. The championships have also garnered international attention with invitations to 2 overseas judges.
One from the Netherlands, Jan Kober, and Bank England has accepted the position as the brass band adjudicator, and they're noted international conductors and adjudicators in their own right.
The 4-day championships are also expected to generate as much as $2 million for the Hunter economy.
In all of the accommodation in Newcastle and the region's booked out. There's some 3,000 people coming to the region over Easter, which is a great economic boost to the whole region.
The highlight of the competition will be a gala concert on the Sunday night. Phil Hind, NBN News.
In a letter to Council General Manager Robert Gibbons yesterday, Richard Owen's Investments claimed Lord Mayor Greg Hees should stand aside on the foreshore planning debate. Their legal opinion was that Councillor Hees had a conflict of interest as both a councillor and member of the Honeysuckle Board. But Council's legal opinion says otherwise.
The Lord Mayor's representation of Council on Honeysuckle does not constitute the sort of conflict of interest that the Code of Conduct covers. He has no private interest in whether a hotel goes ahead or not.
Council is questioning why the Lord Mayor's dual position has never been raised until now.
Concern hasn't been manifest before. The test in the Code of Conduct is whether a reasonable person would see the Mayor as having a conflict of interest. Obviously, the point the Lord Mayor made last night is that reasonable people have not drawn that conclusion.
The issue dominated last night's council meeting with still no compromise between both groups on the horizon. Councillors will consider rezoning and height limits as a matter of urgency next Tuesday. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
Nearly 20% of the population has some form of disability, yet it seems few towns are equipped to cope with special needs. Bubblers, picnic tables and chairs, toilets and footpaths can all pose problems. For those battling such obstacles daily, a gathering at East Maitland was a chance to tell the community and local council what's needed.
It's not for us to say what people with disabilities need. We need to talk to those people. We need to make sure that they know that we're listening to them.
A survey carried out 2 years ago is addressing problems in the city's CBD. Now the group is turning its attention to Maitland's commercial areas with the hope that local businesses will adopt their suggestions.
The dream environment is an environment where we have a landscape which is providing access for everyone.
Mr Kerr says Maitland Council, which is considered to be progressive, still has a long way to go and the community should actively promote change. Sarah Griffiths, NBN News.
The driver of a refrigerated truck was about to turn right into the driveway of his Anna Bay home when a Toyota Land Cruiser ploughed into the rear of his vehicle.
It's caused the truck to go across to the wrong side of the road, and consequently a vehicle travelling in the opposite direction has hit it head on.
The Ford sedan was carrying a Sydney couple in their 60s who had been holidaying in the area. A woman was airlifted by the Westpac rescue helicopter to the John Hunter Hospital suffering multiple injuries. Her husband, who had been driving, received a deep cut to his leg and a possible fractured pelvis. No one else was injured, but the driver of the four-wheel drive suffered shock. Police say poor visibility may have contributed to the crash. Simone Cobb, NBN News.
The third day of the inquiry in Newcastle and more evidence of water in the mine before the tragedy. Mine Subsidence Board employee Gary Hartley told the court the mine surveyor Mark Robinson rang him just prior to the disaster to get plans of an old mine nearby. Mr Hartley says he was told there had been a water problem at Gretley. Just weeks later, Damon Murray, John Hunter, Mark Kaiser and Edward Batterham were drowned after drilling into an old waterfield shaft. The evidence was supported by another mine subsidence employee, Graham Hansen, who told the court he had talked to Mr Hartley about a problem with water. It follows yesterday's revelations that Mine Deputy Alastair McLean made 3 reports of excess water, the last less than 24 hours before the tragedy. And more concern about the accuracy of the maps provided by the Mine Subsidence Board and used by Gretley Colliery. Just prior to the 4 deaths, the owner of the mine, Oakbridge, wrote to the board to say the maps were out by at least 5 metres. The inquiry continues in Newcastle tomorrow. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Commodore sedan was stolen around 3 o'clock this morning. Minutes later, it lay in a twisted wreck. Police say the car was travelling at high speed when the driver lost control, rolled and then crashed into a brick fence of a doctor's surgery. Wreckage from the accident was strewn across the road. Killed was 20-year-old Troy Burns of Canwall, thrown from the rear of the car after the car's roof was torn off. Amazingly, the driver and a second passenger received only minor injuries. Police are interviewing the 18-year-old driver of the car. And a 37-year-old motorcyclist has died after colliding with a truck's trailer in the Newcastle suburb of Wallsend this morning. The Marylands man, who was wearing a helmet, was thrown from his bike and is believed to have suffered severe head injuries. He was taken to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital but died soon after arrival. It's unclear at this stage how the crash happened at the intersection. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
For Newcastle's embattled clothing manufacturer, the deal means 6 months breathing space.
It means the receiver retires in about a week's time, and the company can get on with its business to run its business itself and to seek other financiers to refinance it.
Since Westpac called in the receivers in November, the future of the 90-year-old company has been under a cloud. In order to have the receiver discharged, it had to deposit $600,000 into a solicitor's trust fund by 5 last night. It was a combined effort, money coming from the company itself, its workers and members of the public. The sum was submitted late yesterday afternoon, but the signing of an agreement officially retiring the receiver is yet to come.
It is a tight deal. The company's left with very little money and it has to make drastic reductions in its debt and cash flow.
Rundle's plans to sign the agreement in Sydney on Monday before it begins getting its factory in order. Vanessa Spark, NBN News. It was a tussle between the favourites, world champion prawn eater Fred Monk and his arch-rival Lloyd Moffat. Tails and all, as long as 1 kilo of prawns is devoured in the quickest time possible. Just 4 minutes 46 seconds later and it's all over. A glass of Chardonnay completing the feast. But that's where this year's problems began. The battle transferring to the timekeeper's ring as the decision about who won was debated. But then the final word. After winning the event for the past 10 years, Fred Monk was forced to share the glory, but still not shy about giving away a few tips.
You've got to be able to eat quickly and you've got to be able to peel them pretty quick.
Meanwhile, Lloyd Moffat was basking in his first taste of victory, even though he disputed the outcome.
And now I'm sharing the world champ. A bit dirty that the judges saw it only to be equal. I feel I won this championship fair and square.
It was then time for other celebrities to take to the stage. The Mile Prawn Festival draws about 8,000 seafood lovers to the fishing town of Tea Gardens each year. Some choose to come by boat, others have a more unusual approach. But all come to indulge in seafood delights by the Mile Lakes. Vanessa Spark, NBN News.